Last Sunday, we considered a downtrodden man. It's from John chapter 5. You may recall it was the man who was laid by the pool for many, many years. This week, we meet another man, but this one, he's not hopeless. He is full of faith and confidence and even boldness. And while the man by the side of the pool, when he was asked, "Who was it who healed you?" he said, "I don't know who the man was." But today, this guy knew Jesus. And he knew what Jesus was capable of and the healing power that was within him. We ought to pay attention to this man. And yet, in his own day, no one wanted his opinion. In fact, people did everything within their power to stay as far away from them as they possibly could, for this man was a leper, and therefore he was deemed a threat to anybody he came in contact with in the community. Before we met this man, if we had read a bit earlier in Matthew's gospel, Jesus had just come down from the mountain, the place where he had offered the most important sermon that was ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount. In that sermon, Jesus laid out an alternative vision for the world, a different way of life, a different ethic for the people who would be his followers. And this was an upside-down world, one that was marked by blessings for the least expected of people. You might recall those Beatitudes: blessed are the poor and the persecuted and all other sorts of those who were deemed outsiders. And the first thing that happens after Jesus preaches that sermon and comes down from the mountain, a crowd gathers and forms around him. And among that crowd was one of those outsiders, the man who had a skin disease. Although, come to think of it, calling this man a part of that crowd isn't quite right, because in truth, people did what they could to steer clear of people with skin diseases, or lepers, as they were called. This man's relation to the crowd would have been not as a part of it, but more like a drop of oil dropped into a pool of water on a table. Scatters. People didn't want to catch his disease. And as inconvenient as a skin disease could be, the issue was a much deeper one. For this disease was often believed to be a spiritual ailment. There are places in the Hebrew Bible where leprosy was the result, or believed to be the result of sin, and therefore the one who had it was unclean. In the book of Leviticus, if the sign on the skin wasn't enough to identify the leper, the instructions to them made sure that no one had any doubts left over of who the lepers among them were. Leviticus instructs lepers were to wear torn clothes and let their hair be disheveled. They had to cover the upper lip. And if that wasn't enough to tell you, they were supposed to walk around shouting, "Unclean! Unclean! Unclean!" This communicable form of religious uncleanliness had the power to exclude sufferers and impose unspeakable shame upon them. So no, this man may have been present, but he wasn't part of any crowd. And the weight of all of that, one might think, would be enough to crush a spirit and remove the last vestiges of hope from a person's soul. But as we've heard in our story, that isn't the case at all. This man was full of confidence and faith, so much that he did the unthinkable. This unclean man approached the revered teacher And in an act that was both bold and humble, he knelt before Jesus. And he put the onus on Jesus. If you want, you can heal me. That's beautiful. And a testament to faith that should compel all of us to a deeper kind of confidence and trust in God. And with this man before Jesus, if it wasn't unthinkable enough that he was there, it's even more unthinkable what happens next. Because Jesus stretched out his hand and he touched the man. In essence, Jesus made himself unclean too. Now I have to wonder in that moment if this man's boldness faltered, at least momentarily. Did he shrink back? Did he assume that, like we had heard last week with the man at the pool, that Jesus would speak to him and heal him? He doesn't need to touch the man. Could he have imagined that healing would draw Jesus into the place of his own exclusion? That Jesus would risk the shame that this man has carried too. I don't know how he experienced it, but in any case, Jesus stretched out his hand. And I have to believe that it happened in slow motion. Or at least it must have seemed like slow motion to a crowd that had gathered around Jesus. He stretched out his hand till the point that he touched the man. And Jesus said, I am willing. Be made clean. And immediately the man was healed. And in the midst of a religious system that said both the leper and now Jesus were to be excluded from the life of the community and forced to wear a badge of shame, instead this man was healed. And there was nobody who had to carry shame away from that encounter. Last week, a man by the pool who had no one found the profound power of the love of finding someone who cares. And in two interactions that man had with Jesus, he found, maybe for the first time in his life, the power of community. This week, the power of exclusion and shame are overcome in the loving touch of Jesus. As it was then, religious systems still carry incredible power to name some as righteous and to mark others as shameful and worthy of little but being pushed out of the community. In truth, it's one of the reasons that people have abandoned churches in droves, because they got tired of hearing people say to them over and over and over again, you're not enough. You're not the right kind of person. Your love is unholy. And quite frankly, there are churches all over this town and beyond that keep telling a harmful message on repeat. We're supposed to bring you good news. But when preachers of so-called gospel spend more time judging and determining how unrighteous someone is, it's hard to understand what's good about it. A constant message that says you're not enough, you're flawed, you're worthless, doesn't quite seem right to me. And different traditions have different ways of excluding. I felt it most clearly growing up at altar calls, where persuasive and powerful pleas to come down and get right with God did more to strike fear in me than convince me that God cared one bit about me. And I hear it from others who've come from other traditions too, who carry heavy guilt that they learned at church. People who come here wondering, could God actually love me? And it isn't only church that sends these kinds of messages. There are all sorts of subtle and not so subtle messages about our worth that are tied to our bodies, our bank accounts, the neighborhoods where we reside. I imagine in some form or fashion, every one of us has felt the excluding power of being told we're not the right kind of person for some reason. But as we hear stories like the one we've heard today, where Jesus heals people, I want this to be a place where we have a better story to tell. Ones like the good news that emerged when Jesus was willing to touch the man who had been called unclean. And he was willing to heal the one who had the boldness to ask. I've been praying that each of us would encounter the love of God, the love of Jesus, in the way that the man from our gospel lesson today encountered the love of Jesus. To know the healing power that says to you, you're not unclean. Whoever kept you on the outside was wrong. It wasn't you. I've been praying that we would learn from this man's boldness. After all, Jesus didn't force this encounter. That man forced the issue. I believe that we deserve to be in the presence of a God of love. And I'd note that there isn't any sign that Jesus was frustrated by the inconvenience of this man stopping him. He wasn't bothered that there was a man who in faith claimed his place in front of Jesus. And we need to be a community that follows in the way of Jesus. To be a place where shame and exclusion have no place among us. If you've ever wondered why we have spent so much time over the last several years crafting a welcome statement and then trying to live into that welcome statement to make it more true, and why we keep talking about belonging, it's because it's the work of Jesus. And we are his body in the world. And if we do this right, we still carry the power to stretch forth a hand and offer a touch that heals and makes space and welcomes. By the end of our brief gospel lesson today, Jesus gave the healed man instructions. He said, go to the temple. He hadn't been allowed in the temple up to this point. His uncleanliness said, you can't be here. Jesus sent him to that place. And he instructed him, give the offering that Moses instructed. He was to do that, yes. But more so, he was there to be a witness. He was there to be a witness to those who had the power to name him unclean just moments before he showed up at that temple. He was there to be a sign of the power that overcomes shame and exclusion. I pray to God that we could be a sign of welcome to a world that is hell-bent on defining insiders and outsiders. It starts by hearing Jesus as he looks as he looks into your eyes. And he says, I'm willing to heal you too. Last week, Jesus asked a man by the poolside, do you want to be made well? This week, a man prompts Jesus, and Jesus responds saying, I am willing. May each of us hear that we are not what any system of power and exclusion says about us, but you are loved by a God who desires your well-being. Thanks be to God. Amen.